Join the Ungovernables. No filters, no apologies. This season, we're cracking open Uniswap governance. Welcome to a new episode of the Ungovernable Podcast.
Welcome to a new episode of the Ungovernable Podcast. Today with Derrick Cui, insightful contributor who brings a blend of academic background in economics and computer science, and practical experience in analytics and consulting. He's the lead of the governance department of blockchain at Berkeley, representing significant voting power across many protocols such as Uniswap, Aave, Arbitrum, and Compound. We are Joe and Austin from Alpha Growth, the premier DeFi operations and growth firm. Derrick, great to have you on the podcast, and we just want to know, what else should the listeners know about you?
I think you basically covered everything. I'm a senior at Berkeley. I got into the space maybe like 4 years ago, and I've been in this space ever since. Been in love with, the ethos of it, and have been pretty involved in governance ever since.
I love it. You have quite a blend of a background. What's been your favorite thing to work on? Because you said computer science, governance, consulting, analytics. I feel like there's a lot there. What's kind of your favorite piece to really dive in and dig into?
I honestly think like research in like crypto, just staying on crypto Twitter. It's so much fun just seeing like the news that happens every day. It's like gossip almost. And that's kind of what like governance is almost, right? Like there's always just problems that come up every day, and it's like fun to just follow and see what's up. And then you can like justify it and saying like, oh, I'm doing research, right? But it's fun.
Yeah, you never get bored, that's for sure.
There's so much drama.
Yeah,
exactly. It's fun at the beginning, but it definitely burns you out, I think, more than it should. Also, Derrick, I noticed that you're in the longevity space. So question, just to kick us off on a controversial note, what is the most controversial lifestyle change that you believe every human being should implement?
Controversial.
Against the grain of the mainstream narrative.
I'm glad that like Brian Johnson's like takes on like fitness is like becoming more mainstream. So I guess something like even more, out there is that I think that everyone should, when they get, older, when they die, they should try some type of cryotech just in case. Like my thinking is like, if there's a 0.001% chance that like we find a way to bring people back from the dead, might as well just try it,
I like it. I guess that gets us that's post-mortem though, right? How do we extend the time period it takes before we have to make that decision in the first place?
I think like a lot of the science is like kind of already out there. Wear a lot of sunscreen, stay indoors. I guess like, there's like
that's mainstream.
Yeah.
Putting on sunscreen is super mainstream.
A lot of things are mainstream. like oxygen chambers, I guess. That's
okay. Have you done that?
No, but it's just really expensive if you just stay in the oxygen chamber every day. Yeah.
Maybe we can get a DAO sponsored oxygen chamber for that'd be a fun crypto event actually. Next year, ETH Denver, we'll get a cryo chamber. We'll do like heat cold therapy. That'd be pretty awesome.
Red lights, cold plunge. I love that. Count me in. Yeah, I guess to maybe head on Derrick too. First, I'm kind of curious how you got into the longevity space. Just my personal curiosity, because I feel like that's always often a lot of people when they see death like on the horizon in some capacity. I'm kind of curious on like what got you into longevity. And we were scoping out like your personal website, and one of those pieces was longevity on your site.
Yeah, I've honestly just been kind of obsessed about it for like a long time, just like more from like a philosophical stance, I guess. Just like, what's the point of death, and like what can we do about it? And then like, there's a lot of like schools of thought. You can believe in religion, you can try to like be okay with it, but then like I kind of realized that there's a bunch of people and their entire jobs is to like fight it and like kind of realize that it's actually possible, right? Like in the next, maybe 100 or 200 years, like it's possible to reverse aging, which is crazy. And that's how I kind of got into it. And then I read a couple books on it, and yeah, I've been obsessed ever since.
I love
Okay,
it.
since we're on the topic, since I can't not go forward without asking this. So you mentioned the cryo stuff, right? And if you're listening and you really want us to just talk about DeFi, just give us like 2 minutes. Hold on. If you're saying the cryo thing would be cool, have you heard about that concept where when you die, you actually lose mass in the form of energy that leaves your body? And some people think that that's your consciousness. Do you subscribe to that?
See, I don't know if like you don't really know if that's true or not. I'm just like hoping that it's not,
Because if it is true, then yeah, we can preserve a human body ad infinitum. However, if you shock it back to life, does that consciousness just come from the soul well and just return back to the body? Or I don't know how all that's gonna go. But that was the first thing that came to mind when you said you're into the philosophical side of it and the cryo stuff. Food for thought.
A new animal.
I don't know. All right, we'll get into the business.
I would love to have a podcast with you for longevity. I could talk
Yes.
about that all day. Peter Attia, Brian Johnson, Andrew Huberman could go on all day about that. But just to highlight a little bit about your experience, give me a little bit of context on how like the academic experience got you into DAO governance. Was it like a blockchain club, or how did things get kicked off and kind of morph into being the lead of governance at blockchain at Berkeley?
Yeah, so I guess I got into this space maybe freshman year of college at Berkeley, just because I go to hackathons, and as a poor freshman, college student, just want to make as much money as possible. And I go to these hackathons, and then I realize like no one's signing up for these Web3 tracks. Now at the time, I have no idea what Web3 is. So I start like signing up for them and then winning because no one else signs up for them, which, I guess that's a problem on its own. But like that's kind of how I got introduced to it, to like the dev side. And then I just kept on doing them, maybe like 5 or 6. And then I was like, okay, actually this tech is kind of cool. Like I can kind of see like the vision behind it. And then I joined blockchain at Berkeley after that, my sophomore year. And then there I did like consulting projects, kind of dev work too. Stuff like did some projects on like Algorand, for example. And then, our club makes people go to like one governance meeting minimum a year. So I just went to one, and then I just saw kind of how much fun it was. We have so much power as college students to make these decisions, and I kind of was hooked from the beginning because I think I've always kind of been interested in like politics and like economics and things like that. So it kind of was a perfect fit. And then just ever since then, um, it's been a ride.
Going back to square one, when you signed up for that first Web3 hackathon, do you remember what you built or what you tried to build? And what did you win?
Oh, I do. Okay. It was Cal Hacks, which is like Berkeley's annual hackathon. And it's like a general purpose hackathon. Like there's like sponsors from all over. And then Solana was there. So I built like a really shitty like digital. So I took like an NFC card and I basically put your wallet on it. And then basically if you tap this app that we made, you could choose how much to pay, and then you put a password in to like confirm the transaction. So kind of as like a payment terminal to like make the experience of paying feel just like a credit card. And then like we won a bunch of money, and they like invited us to go to like Solana, their like conference or whatever. But I had a midterm, so I couldn't go. But
That's impressive. That's your first one. I feel like that's still lacking in this space today.
yeah, I think it's like more like there's no kind of purpose of using it. Like there's no reason that anyone would use it.
What about a taco stand that wants to take crypto as payment?
Like you can kind of already do that with like the Coinbase card or like stuff like that, right?
I guess so. Maybe they they need to go and hit up all the taco stands because I still haven't been able to pay with crypto.
True.
If you're listening to this, Coinbase, get after it.
Please.
That's super nice.
Go ahead, Austin. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, I'm kind of curious because there's all these different like kind of like college organizations. Do you guys work with other folks on these, like whether it be like governance proposals or just like in governance in general? And is it like pretty frequent, or is it more just through the forum activity?
We have a couple of like chats of just university clubs doing governance, and we chat about like the big proposals. But honestly, it's like pretty casual, I would say. Yeah, I guess we don't talk that often, not as often as we should.
Okay, gotcha. I was just wondering if you guys were all going to like hopping on like a Zoom call or like a Google
Oh.
Meet and kind of dissecting the proposal together and digging into the bits and pieces of it and coming on a conclusion together.
We do that like inside our club, but not
Okay.
across clubs. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Oh, that's awesome. I guess I'm kind of curious too, like as like a student, right? There's a lot of college kids who are going out, spending money rather than trying to make money through governance. What did some of your peers say about like, what was their reaction when you started talking about governance and like Web3?
Well, first everyone tells me it's a scam, and then
I'm still not convinced that it's not.
every day I wake up and I don't know. One part of me was like, maybe it is a scam, but maybe that's okay. Yeah. So I either stop talking about it then, or if they keep on asking me questions, the way I frame it is like, I don't think Web3 governance is like a solution to Web2 governance. In my mind, it's just a way for Web3 to function, because the entire permissionless system requires a new way of governance. It's not like a replacement of Web2 governance, but it's just kind of the one that fits in the Web3 world. So that's my pitch.
I like that take. Yeah, I think that's very fair. And I don't know if you've kind of approached this in the same way, but when a lot of people, they find out that I work in crypto, and that, of course they're like, oh, let's do it. And then the thing I say to them is like, I'm not trying to convince you. You're not usually someone in the United States is not in financial pain, right? They're not being rugged by their own country's currency. So I'm not trying to pitch you this thing. And so I kind of just remain neutral, and I just tell them, these are the problems that we're solving for different people around the world. And someday maybe you'll be in the same amount of pain. And until then, laugh as much as you want. That's okay. All right. So Blockchain Berkeley, you guys are delegate in several DAOs, Aave, Uni, Compound, Arbitrum. Based on your wisdom as a delegate in so many of these different communities, how, generally speaking, would you improve the structure of DAO governance?
Ooh, that's a big one. There's a lot of problems with DAO governance. I think the problem comes down to like its inherent like purpose. Like, why do we even have governance? And there's a lot of answers to that. Some believe it's like, oh, we make this process more democratic. Some believe it's like just a way for the token to have some kind of value, so the team can sell it. And I think that the DAO should either have full control or no control. That's my thinking. Like, there should be no governance, or the DAO should have full control. And what I mean by full control is like control over all the levers. Because there's so many protocols where, like, also in Uniswap, where like all you have control over is like the fund. And like, why even have governance if it's just a grants program, right? That should just be like 2 people from their foundation giving out grants. That's kind of what it is anyways, And then you have some protocols where you have all the levers, and I think it still needs to be more like a lot more streamlined. But at least there's more things going on. I think a great example is like Arbitrum. It's a mess over there, but at least there's people talking in the forums like every day. It's like everyone's super active. Everyone wants to do something. because they have so many levers, they can do anything. But in their case, I think it's case by case. They need just a lot more streamline in terms of like who has what responsibility and what capacity. They just passed a proposal on that, like the OP Co pretty recently on that to like do that. So I think they're heading in a good direction. I just kind of rambled on for a bit.
No, I think there's some truth to that. I think we all know that centralized is way more efficient in almost every single metric except for maybe catastrophic hacks or something, right? Other than that, that's why the military is so efficient. That's why huge corporations are incredibly efficient. And that's not necessarily what we're competing with here. But this idea of having one or the other, I've never really heard that take before. And so in the context of Uniswap, what would you change then? Would you just say, let's just burn the token and just call it a day?
Yeah, I have a lot of controversial takes on Uniswap.
Bring them. This is what this is why we're
feel
here.
free.
This is literally why we're here. We want to hear all of them.
Like, what is the purpose of the Uni token? Like one of my main thoughts is like the only reason why governance exists in a lot of protocols, and maybe Uniswap, is because the token has to do something. You can't have a token that you sell to make money if it does nothing. So it has to do something. And governance is the easiest way to slap some value on it. You slap some value, give them 0.5 bips, and just call it a day. And then like that's super easy to set up. That'll take you like a month to set up. And then, your token somehow just gets $1 billion in value, right? It's like cool. It's like equity or something like that. For Uniswap, I think there's a lot of problems, especially with the recent Unichain issue. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think like the foundation or labs keeps all the revenue from the sequencer. So the DAO kind of just is only stuck with like the protocol's revenue. And there's a lot of problems with that. I wish that Uniswap Foundation just was really clear and was like, yeah, we're taking it from here, like, sorry guys, you guys are just a grants program now. We're taking from here, see ya. And then they just kind of do everything. Or they just give control of the DAO to the DAO for everything, right? Like we get control over deployments, over, decisions on the design, decisions on future upgrades, etc. So I don't think the latter is going to happen. And it seems like the first is what slowly is happening without people admitting it.
Yeah, I think the newest edition is going to be interesting, but I think it'll offer a pretty clear roadmap, vision, and runway for Uniswap to grow, and Unichain and UniV4 adoption and the intersection of those two. I think there's a lot of exciting things on the horizon, but admittedly, yes, it's been a little bit of a confusing thing because 6 months ago, Uniswap Labs and Uniswap Foundation were like, we don't even know each other, we've never met, and now they're doing a lot of things together, and these joint ventures, especially around Unichain, for instance, the DAO felt pretty blindsided, and so I don't know that there's a silver bullet that makes everybody happy, that's for sure, but I think to your point, yeah, I think the Uniswap token's main utility, aside from governance, as you say, is speculation on future rev sharing with the Uniswap protocol. And I did speak with a couple delegates about this idea that would be, if for some reason the Uniswap Foundation and Uniswap Labs does something or continues to do things that the DAO really disagrees with, and a lot of the delegates feel continually blindsided by, there is a lever that the DAO could technically pull, which is slapping a massive fee on top of the underlying Uniswap contracts. It would essentially be like, we're going to chop our own head off.
Yeah.
And which I do think is a very unique fail-safe of DAO governance. There is, I don't remember. Do you remember the Humpy attack on Compound?
Compound, yeah.
Yeah, so that was one of the first major cataclysms over in Compound DAO, and essentially what happened over there was everybody realized like, oh, this is no longer decentralized. Somebody has majority voting power of this DAO, one of the most decentralized, what was thought as the most decentralized protocols. And one of the exit strategies that we had we not been able to negotiate with this person and come to terms, was we were basically going to send the token to zero, essentially. And what that would have done, and then we would have basically minted a new Compound token and issued that to everybody that, except for those tokens in the other. So that was just like one exit strategy that we were talking through with some of the delegates. And I think that is kind of long-winded way to say there is still that fail-safe of DAO governance, is you always will be able to shoot the protocol in the foot if you absolutely have to.
Yeah, I don't think anyone wants to do that though.
Definitely
That's
not.
the problem. And also you can't get enough, it's really hard to get enough people together to agree that, this is it. This is enough. There's always people that are like, oh, maybe it'll change in the future. They're optimistic, but
Definitely. On these, okay, so I really appreciate the controversial opinions that you're bringing to the table here. It's sometimes tough to avoid conflicts of interest in such a small industry, right? If you're an organization that wishes to grow or a delegate that wishes to grow, what would you say is the DAO that you've worked with that has the best approach to dealing with and handling and avoiding conflicts of interest?
that's a great question. I don't think any DAO does a good job. I think it's like based on like the definition, like what is a conflict of interest? If the only proposals coming out are like easy yeses, then like, yeah, I guess there's no conflict of interest because like everything is an easy yes. Like, I think if there's nothing to do in the DAO, then there's no conflict of interest because there's nothing to do in the DAO,
So as long as the DAO is benefiting, it doesn't necessarily matter if there is any sort of conflict of interest involved in pushing that initiative forward. Is that your take?
Yeah, I don't think that's a good thing. That's what I'm trying to say, I guess. Like, I think
Okay.
it's good if there are conflicts of interest, right? Like, if you look at like politics in the world, communist countries have no conflict of interest ever. Like, is that a good thing? I don't know, probably not, And then, you have some countries where they just have conflict all the time. Is that good? Not, because they can't get anything done. So it's like a balance almost, right? But we'll see.
You're kind of saying like if they have no conflict of interest, then they're in the worst spot because nothing's really being done. Like they're not moving forward. If at least you have some, then you're at least creating something that creates that conflict of interest.
Yeah, like if your entire DAO is just a grants program, yeah, there's gonna be no conflict of interest because it's just a grants program. If your entire DAO is just like a fee switch, then like, what's the point of the DAO?
Yeah. How do you think we can create like healthy, like challenging and controversy? So I feel like that's kind of what you're getting at a little bit. It's like if we can challenge ourselves. I remember working for one larger Fortune 500 company. They said like challenging each other is good because that means we're driving each other forward. So in your mind, like how do we create that like environment?
I think there's a lot of that kind of goes into the problem of like voter fatigue almost, delegate fatigue, where like, people stop caring because they feel like their voice doesn't matter or that the proposals are going to pass anyways. So there's no point in voting. So there's a lot of solutions on that front that I think have problems, like there's like delegate reward solutions where delegates get paid to vote, or like you have proposals where if you're an active delegate, you'll get delegated more from the treasury. None of these have really solved the issue. It's just kind of kept a couple of the main delegates on board that would have been on board anyways.
Mm-hmm.
That's my take. What was your question again? I kind of just went on a tangent.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're kind of getting at it. Like there's not a solution right now, but in your mind, would there be a solution to help with creating like a environment where there is, healthy conflict to overall make the DAO in a better place?
Yeah, I think it's also like a problem where no one knows what a better place is, right? Like if you look at like Aave, it's very clear because it's just one dude running the show. You know,
Mm.
ACI guy, like he has a mandate, he's gonna make it happen. That's his definition of a step forward, you know. And then everyone kind of has a different definition, and that's kind of a problem, right? Like on Uniswap, you know, some delegates believe like the step forward is a fee switch, or the step forward is to spend all of the DAO's money, or the step forward is to save as much money as possible and just create a war chest for, I don't know, God knows when. Or, you know, a step forward is to have more active discussion about like menial things. So like I think that's a problem that like there's no one clear solution of what a DAO actually needs to do.
Mm.
Like, if a DAO, let's say like a DAO, their regular day to day is just a grants program, you know, like, is a step forward to do more than grants, or is it is to get better at grants? You know, that's even like a conflict, right? Like, what do you even, well, what's the priority there? And, you know, outside of grants, like, what do you want the protocol? What do you want the delegates to do? Because the delegates aren't gonna dev these things. The delegates aren't gonna
Yeah.
like, you know, push these things forward if they're not getting incentivized to.
Quick note, I do acknowledge what you're saying about how it's problematic that the delegates don't agree. However, you think about the United States of America, it's like literally 50-50 on most fundamental issues, to where people are willing to riot in the streets and fight each other and remove each other as Facebook friends if you disagree with one trivial fundamental thing and value, right? And I think there is some beauty in that, because that's the culture that we've created. We have this very non-homogeneous cultural melting pot of different perspectives and ideologies. And I think with a DAO like Uniswap, it's going to be pretty similar. It's one of the largest DAOs. It's got one of the largest treasuries. It's got a lot of heats on the bogey, and so a lot of people care about this. And I think that's just kind of a natural path of an organization in size. Is that, yeah, there's going to be people that disagree on the direction of the ship. Should we go north or should we go south?
Yeah, yeah. I think one issue that like no DAO has also ever solved is like onboarding new delegates. Like if you want to be a new delegate, it's kind of impossible. Right? Like, you just kind of put your proposal, like you have to spend a lot of time being unpaid, you know, working on some kind of passion project. That doesn't exist in like normal governance, right? Like in normal United States, you want to do some kind of, you know, political thing, you get elected and then you get paid, and there's a lot of opportunities to get elected, a lot of opportunities to work for like think tanks or like places where like you get paid to like steer the ship. There's no like place for that in governance, right? Like you just
There's no term limits typically, unless it's more of like accountability or a special working group. But as a delegate, and I was just talking to somebody about this actually last week, I totally agree with you. I think there should be some sort of like annual delegate race, but I don't think that I think more delegation should be unlocked from the treasury in this cohort. So you do a delegate race, and if you have 80,000 votes delegated to you, you're not necessarily going to lose out on those 80,000 votes for the following year. You don't have to run a freaking reelection campaign all the time, just like US politicians do. But instead, it allows people like Joe or Austin or a new V4 hook project or someone that's really interested in getting involved. It allows them to step up, share a little bit about themselves, and be eligible for a tranche of new delegation that would come from the foundation or the DAO. And that way it would kind of dilute everybody's voting power a little bit, and potentially it would maybe increases in quorum or something. You can turn the knobs and dials. But I definitely agree that there's some room for improvement around the barriers to entry and becoming a delegate into a mature DAO. Absolutely.
Yeah, I like that. I think like M0 Foundation, they do something similar where if you vote, you get more voting power basically, but it's, I don't know how, it's a pretty new DAO, so we'll see. Yeah, I think that'd be cool. I think like a big problem though is that like so many of the tokens were unlocked from the very beginning, right? Like, college DAOs like blockchain at Berkeley, kind of got the good side of the stick, where we just kind of did nothing and we got delegated a shit ton of tokens anyways. Like that's great. But like we're not like inherently invested in these DAOs, right? Like no one's paying me. I just do it because it's fun.
And you don't even necessarily have to have any uni token.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. So on that note, I'm going to ask a question, and I promise this is not my opinion, but I have heard this, and so I'm going to ask on behalf of the people that have made this critique. A lot of people have said it's mind-boggling that in some cases billions of dollars are governed by college students. What would you say to those people?
It is mind-boggling. I agree. It is mind-boggling. I wasn't there when it was decided. I wasn't in the room. You know, those are just kind of the cards that have been dealt. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know if the solution is to burn it all down or if the solution is to kind of find a way around it. I think it's comes from like a more inherent problem with like VCs where like they need to delegate to someone and they can't delegate to high schools and colleges kind of makes sense. But I think that problem is slowly going to go away, especially in this administration. Some VCs are actually starting to vote, right? You see like on Morpho, like State Capital is voting, Bentera is voting on like Arbitrum. Like more VCs, top tier VCs are starting to actually vote with their own tokens instead of delegating them away. So we'll see if like this cycle kind of shifts that narrative that like the token holders actually vote with their own tokens.
Do you think that there's any concern around the sheer quantity of votes that a large VC that maybe led around would have? Because then it's not really decentralized anymore, right? If you've got someone that bought in at bought $10 million clip of super low valuation, then when the DAO launches and quorum's low enough, that VC runs the whole show. And that's not typically how Silicon Valley Web 2 companies have operated in the past necessarily. So curious on your take.
Yeah, I think that I love that question because like I am an intern at Pantera, so I know the other side. And I think that goes back to my point of like the only reason that Web3 governance exists isn't to replace Web2 governance, but because like that's the only thing we could do in the Web3 space. Like the token has to do something. So why not slap governance on it and just call it a day? And that seems to be like that kind of inherently has problems because the token is supposed to, the token has to provide value to investors, which kind of makes sense, kind of like equity. But then the token has to do something. So then they decide it also does governance. But like if the token does two things, which is provide equity and do governance, like which one do you prioritize? And it makes sense from the developer's point of view to prioritize equity first because they're your investors. Then you focus on governance next. And then you tailor governance based on like how many people are active, how diverse the delegates are, blah, blah, blah. But then like the equity piece kind of gets away where like, a large investor might have like a lot of the quorum. That's kind of, I think, an inherent flaw. There's people designing like two token systems. Like, oh, like one is a voting token, one is an equity token. But like, if it's just equity, then it's kind of a meme coin, right? Like, because the equity doesn't do anything. There's no like stock buybacks. There's no, free cash flow. You can't do anything like fundamental analysis on it or anything. So like, it has to do something. So governance it is.
Well, if we do ever get back to fundamentals, I think that's where your point would be challenged. It's like, okay, you can stake your token and do protocol revenue share, right? I remember when I first was looking at a lot of DeFi protocols from an objective lens, there were some that had like $5 million a year of protocol revenue, and the governance token was worth $4 million FTV. It's like, well, this is that would be the most lucrative private equity in all time if someone did that, right? So it's still a little bit broken. One more question on the blockchain at Berkeley stuff. So I've always wondered this. So I went to university and I was involved in some things, but not blockchain club. That was before. That was after my time, unfortunately. I would have been very intrigued in getting involved in that. But I was in a fraternity, and one thing about the fraternity is the strength of a fraternity and the how active the fraternity was and how prevalent they were at the university kind of ebbed and flowed based on the participation and how well you did in recruiting and what people had, their social status and what you thought about them and how well you threw parties and all that stuff. And then on the other hand, my friend was in a robotics club and they competed, did all this stuff. And then by the time that they were seniors, it was just seniors in the club. And then when they graduated, the club died. So how has this been for you guys in the recruiting process and in maybe some things you've heard from other blockchain organizations about how do you guys keep this organism alive as you pass the baton to the next generation?
That's a great point. I think both of like your examples kind of happen. Like I know a couple like college clubs, like blockchain college clubs that like just died just because there's no interest. It was a bear market. And then like the couple of people who joined, who created the club as freshmen, graduated, and then it kind of died. I'm not going to name any names, East Coast schools. But I think blockchain at Berkeley's done a good job. Number one, just because so many founders come out of Berkeley. So there's always like a reputation almost to like uphold. You're like, oh, like who are the top people who came out of the crypto space? Oh, like so many of them are from Berkeley and they always want to like give back. There's always like kind of opportunities to do that. And also we're a public school, right? We have like 40,000 kids and club culture is like a huge thing at Berkeley. Like everyone wants to get into a club and it's super competitive to get into a club. Like even like the consulting clubs on campus where you just like consult for companies, like the acceptance rates are like 1% or like 5%. Like it's lower than to get into the school. Like these things are pretty competitive. So I think because of that kind of helps our club because everyone just wants to get into a club. And like blockchain at Berkeley is known as like, oh, like a high tier club because of like our alumni network, like the people that like were out of it. So we always get like a lot of applications, which is great. I do agree that it ebbs and flows during the bull and bear markets. There's just fewer people interested in it. But because we're such like a niche club and we're like the only crypto club basically on campus, kind of the people that know about crypto or want to know about it end up applying. And like, it's like I think a pretty good pipeline. I don't know. So far, it's been like almost 10 years. So we'll see how long this club lasts.
So it's more of like the culture of like the college as itself and kind of the population of the culture, not as much about like recruiting new freshmen to come in to the blockchain club.
Yeah, I think I totally agree. Yeah, like, some private schools, they have, students have better things to do than join a club where they're not getting paid and just do crypto work just because, if you're a private school and like, your school will pay you to go on trips to like random countries around the world, or you get paid, it's like free to join like a frat or something. Like, if I was in their position, yeah, I wouldn't join a blockchain club because it just like makes a lot more sense to do something else. But in Berkeley where it's just only clubs, it's the only thing you can do, it kind of helps us out.
It's just the opportunities. This is going off on a little tangent. I'm curious what your thoughts are on like conditional funding markets and if you believe people will bet with their beliefs and like their values, or if they'll bet with like the expected outcomes. So the futurary markets with the Uniswap Foundation for like lending protocols. I'd love to get your take on that.
Wait, conditional funding markets are, what exactly do you mean by that?
Yeah, so essentially people will basically bet on like a market, right? So let's say, for example, for the Uniswap Foundation, they're going to be doing this for lending markets on Unichain. And so what you would do instead of just like voting, you actually bet money on which are the two top performing lending protocols that you would expect to outperform the market, or essentially the competitors. And so when that happens, from my understanding, you get like rewarded if you choose the right one. So what do you it's kind of like poly market at the end of the day. A little bit more on the governance side of things, but would love to hear your thoughts if you feel like people will actually bet with their beliefs, or if they're just more of like expected outcome. Hey, I think these two are gonna win.
I think for like, yeah, I remember seeing that. It was like last year. Like, I guess it's more relevant now. Um, I think people always start betting with their beliefs, but then they realize they can make more money if they just bet based on an expected outcome. That's just kind of how betting markets work, I think. Yeah, I don't think it'll be like a big thing on Uniswap. It's just like kind of a side project almost, just like a way to get more TVL, but we'll see. Like kind of related to that, but maybe more controversial is like LobbyFi, where, there's this protocol that mainly exists in like Arbitrum, where you can literally delegate money to the protocol, delegate your tokens, and then you pay for Immunify to either vote yes or no. And whatever side gets the most amount of money, they vote. And then Immunify takes like the money that's voted in yes or no and gives it back to the people who delegated to them, almost as like a.
So they take like, okay, let's say it's a yes vote. They would take the no money and give it to all the people that voted yes.
No. They would
It's
take
kinda
yes. They take the yes and no money and give it to anyone who delegated their voting power tokens to the Immunify protocol.
So it's kind of like a bribe.
Yeah. It's basically it's lobbying, so it's LobbyFi.
Is
Hello?
it secret though? Is it zero knowledge, or is it totally in public that you can see who's trying to bribe? Because if some service provider is just paying a bunch of money to bribe that, also, what would be I don't really understand the incentive model. How would LobbyFi get those votes?
Oh,
So
because because if you delegate your tokens to LobbyFi, then you get an APY, because for the people that vote yes or no, you get some part of that money. So it's like, back to the question of like, what is the point of the token? It's either equity or governance. It's hard to do both. But if you basically turn it into like a fee switch, like for governance, where you just make an APY, yeah, that sounds pretty attractive. Yeah, I don't know how successful it'll be though. I don't know if anyone actually cares enough to bribe governance votes.
I mean, it's kind of like the voter escrow 3-3 flywheel.
Yep.
That it seems to work pretty well when it comes to building DeFi liquidity, but does that actually help govern and drive forward DAO governance? We'll see. I do like these experimental approaches, and I think you're pretty much on that train as well. I think that's why you've been so successful, is because you're totally open to experimentation. You have controversial opinions about growth and how we should run things. So how has that affected your decision making process? What are some ways in which Uniswap DAO, for instance, could be experimenting more?
I don't know in the near future what the Uniswap DAO could even do. That's the problem. My problem. Like, does the DAO like create their own hooks? Do they fully embrace Unichain, or do they say like, no, like, we'll put a fat fee switch on everything Uni related, and then get people to use like the canonical versions on all the chains? Like, I don't know what the answer is. So,
well, then I'll make the question a little bit more actionable. Instead of wondering what the DAO could potentially do, Derrick, let's say you open up your tally and you see that 41 million votes have been delegated to blockchain at Berkeley, because everybody just knows you guys are visionaries of the century and you're going to make the right decisions. What are all the things you would do with the Uniswap DAO besides drain the wallets and send?
yeah, I'd send $1 billion to my wallet, fly to the Cayman Islands. But I think personally, this is a super controversial take. I don't think the Uniswap, I think the Uniswap token is a meme coin anyways. So therefore, the focus should be on development on the protocol, so more people use the protocol, so that people speculate up the price of Uniswap, even if there's no kind of a direct fee switch or anything like that. So I think I'd rather just invest all that money into like just spend all that money on people to build hooks, to build new versions, to incentivize the protocol, like provide a lot of like incentives to boost like the APYs and like to boost like the spreads so they're as tight as possible. Yeah, I guess that's what I would do. I would just kind of spend all the money in the DAO and just see where that takes us. There's still a
Spend
lot
on
of
growth.
there's still a lot, yeah, exactly. Just focus on growth, but like not care about like the token value at all. I don't,
Mm.
I think if the Uniswap token is already speculative in nature, might as well just keep it speculative. Never add a fee switch. Just actually I should not have said that. But just like focus entirely on growth. Like spend all this money just to grow the protocol. Maybe the token will increase in value. Maybe it won't. Who knows? Doesn't even matter. Like I don't think it even really matters.
So when you're tackling growth, would it be like market share or would it be like developers using Uniswap infrastructure? What's kind of the North Star for you?
I think for each product they would have like their own North Star, right? Uni V4 would be hooks, Uniswap in general would be TVL, you know, volume, number of unique users, market share, of course, just kind of everything across
One
the board.
thing, Derek, that I remember back when you and I first met, we had some pretty cool conversations around experimental growth strategies with the DAO. And one of these things that we've come across recently, especially with the new V4 stuff, is it's a little bit problematic because each of these V4 hooks is almost like a new DeFi protocol in and of itself. And so because of that, this fragmented innovation is really cool for identifying really cool use cases, right? You're giving people a sandbox to play in, you're giving people a makerspace. But the issue is if you give a little bit of support to a lot of people, nothing will, it's unlikely that anything is going to really come out and grow. I think about it as like if you take 100 seeds and you just throw them out into a field and then it rains one time, it's like, yeah, that's cool, but none of those are going to turn into trees, right? They might sprout, but that's about it. Versus if you take 3 seeds and you take that same amount of water and you contrive each of the 3 to grow up. So all that to say, would you support a DAO funded VC arm specifically for V4 hooks?
That's a big question.
Really? It's a yes or no.
I think, I'll plead the fifth for now, but I'll explain why. I think that it could be successful if it's implemented properly, but I think in my opinion, hooks are a new opportunity, not for Unichain, not for Uniswap, but for protocols that want to use it. Like, I don't think Uniswap needs to convince people to use it. Because if you need to convince people to use it, then like they're not going to use it, or they're going to use it for the money and then run away. That's kind of the problem with Arbitrum, right? You incentivize all these orbits, you incentivize all these things, and then you get a negative return on investment because all these people just come in for the rewards and then leave. So I think with time, Uniswap has kind of already anchored itself as like the DeFi protocol. So if a chain like Ondo, or if a chain like some TEE product needs liquidity, then they themselves will pay their own workers to make a hook that makes sense for them. And I think that's what's going to happen. And I think that's like the way forward, right? Like these protocols will, spend their own money to build these hooks. They don't need to be incentivized. They don't even need to ask the DAO for money. And I think that's like the beauty of the hooks. But that also goes back to my point of like, if I were to change the protocol, like the hooks don't accrue any value to the token, right? Like there's no value accrued at all. And so like if people use the hooks, there's no reason for the Uniswap token to go up. So, and I don't think it needs to. So that's kind of a tangent, but I guess that's one view. And another view is just, if you're going to send seeds out and, one wash will get it away, just keep on putting seeds out. Just spend millions of dollars and just see what happens. If like this is like, if we really want to believe, this is it. This is like the version of Uniswap we want to bet on. Let's just spend $100 million and see what happens. But
I think we're about to.
yeah, I know. See, I don't know. People are pretty mad about it though.
Okay, I do appreciate that take. I think there's some truth to that, but I would hate for us to get too far into this build it and they will come. That is something that I think I don't know if that's really proven to be true over the years. I think there needs to be the subsidies, whether it's the blockchain itself that funds a project or a VC that subsidizes growth. I don't know. I think there's two schools of thought for sure. Time will definitely tell, but also to your point, I think that's a very wise take that, yeah, if the market wants it, the market will pay for it to be built. So like you said, let's say Compound, right? Compound's like, oh, I really want to do out of range liquidity on Uniswap pools, then Compound will pay for it. If they really want that, right? It shouldn't necessarily be all product driven on the Uniswap side. So I see both sides, definitely. In your eyes, how would we continue to grow Uniswap? In your opinion, is there a silver bullet that we have not fired yet?
The treasury.
We should weaponize. You want to weaponize the treasury?
Well, we could just spend more money from the treasury. That's kind of what like Aave is doing. They just keep on spending money and just hope they'll get a return. And it's been pretty successful in Uniswap.
What is that return though? I think that's the key piece here. What is that return? If we spend $100 million, what is the return that you would be happy with?
On the money side, at least 100 million.
What though? $100 million of revenue to the DAO, 100 million of what exactly?
See, that's where it gets tricky. I think.
Is it $100 million of buy pressure on the Uni token? Net buy pressure?
Yeah, I think at least 100 million buy pressure is kind of more conventional take, or at least like $100 million in DAO treasury, basically. Like you see the DAO treasury increase by more than you spent. But at the same time, like, what are we waiting for? We have all this money. Why are we still accruing it? Like, should we just be trying to spend this money? Like, when are we expected to finish spending all this money? That's a good question to ask. Like, are we supposed to just hold on to it till infinity? Or, are we going to eventually spend it? I think V4 with hooks, we've already kind of moved out of the realm of the token does something or the token brings value, because people don't need to buy the Uni token to do anything now. They just can do hooks. They can do their own thing. So in my mind, like maybe this is it. This is it. The end game's here. A couple of years, there's going to be no more Uni in the treasury. Let's just start spending money and see what happens.
What would be like the top 3 ticket items you'd spend it on?
One, on targeted grants. I guess you could even call that like venture arm, if you give them enough money.
So you do support it?
It could be.
Okay.
2, more developer teams and more like DevRel to get other people on board. But kind of the Uni Foundation and Labs already does this, which is a problem.
Yep.
And then just incentives, right? Like get, my personal take from like the grand scheme of things is that like spreads are still way too high. And, Uniswap's model is based on other people optimizing on Uniswap's spreads. So if Uniswap itself has tight spreads, then they can, blow out the competition on like the derivatives market too. Because, a lot of protocols are built on top of Uniswap having wide spreads so that they can optimize them. But if we, put a lot of money into making these spreads, razor thin, then we can capture a lot of market share that we didn't even know there was.
There's a lot of value that is being accrued by these projects that are built on top, when in reality, Uniswap and its liquidity providers could be extracting that value by tightening those spreads.
Yeah, I think so. But like that would kind of piss everyone off because that would make the DAO less money and make the people building on top of Uniswap no money, right? Like the DAO would actively make less money if they did that.
Who should
And
make the most money? The projects building on top, the developers and projects that are built on top, liquidity providers, or the DAO?
I personally think liquidity providers. I think
agree.
that like the entire point of the blockchain is that it's cheaper than Visa. It's cheaper than Web2 projects. And right now it's like not, like if you look at spreads, it's like clearly not. So if we get spreads down, make a lot of people mad because they'll lose all their money. Like the protocol will go bust, but at least it hits that vision.
Do you think there will be more or fewer blockchains in 10 years from now that people use? I mean, there might be fringe ones that are just being built by foreign governments, but like, do you think in general the distribution of used blockchains is going to be greater or less?
I think a lot less. My take on that is if Monad fails, then no one's gonna build another L1 ever again. Because Monad has like $300 million. If they fail, then it's kind of over for the L1 narrative. Like there's no reason to build another L1. If someone raises $300 million and still fails, your $2 million project is not going anywhere.
That puts in perspective for sure.
No, that's a strong take. Yeah, it's hard to argue with that. Derrick, give us some alpha. What's an underhyped project? What's something you're super excited about?
I think, just because I just talked about it on Monad, I'm still super bullish on Monad. My take is that Monad's gonna... Now, maybe I shouldn't say this in public, whatever. And my take is that Monad's gonna beat like Berachain and Mega ETH because of economics. I think my perspective is that like Ethereum solved the economics issue. AWS, a single AWS servers is still going to be more performant than any chain anyone ever makes on the blockchain. But people don't actually care about performance. People care about yield, right? And Ethereum solved that problem because by having block builders, you have inherent yield that accrues to like the native token, which is Ethereum. And then you can build everything off that native token that already has this inherent yield, which is like the block building yield. Like no matter what happens, the block builders are still going to build the blocks and earn their fees, and they need to put their Ethereum somewhere. So they put it back into their own protocol. They have to do their own transactions or things like that. So Ethereum solved that, and everyone's trying to optimize for some kind of efficiency thing, but like no one cares about efficiency. They care about making money. So Monad just takes Ethereum's model and just multiplies it by 3 by pipelining it, and it still has that kind of incentive model of block builders, and then you build yield on top of it. Mega ETH is a single server run by one person. Okay, I shouldn't say this out loud, whatever. It's run by like one person, and then it's hyper performant. That just sounds like AWS to me. Berachain has a liquidity focus, which is great. But when the liquidity dries up, we'll see what happens. There's like you can already imagine what could possibly happen. But on Monad, it's hard to argue that the economics will dry up just because it's based on like Ethereum's economics.
The hot take. All right.
Shit, maybe I shouldn't have said that.
I love it. I love this whole conversation, Derrick. I'm glad you came on. And okay, you got a genie in a bottle. You got one wish for Uniswap. What would it be?
This is going to be the hottest take ever, and I don't think realistically it'll happen. And I personally am not entirely for it. However, if I were to step back and I was a genie in the bottle, I would just replace the token, split the token into 2 tokens, one for governance and one for equity. And the equity one has a fee switch or has some kind of value accrual, and that's all it is, just an equity piece. And then the governance token just votes, and that's all it does. And the governance token has some kind of value, but it's like, you like can barely sell it, where there's like almost no market for it. That's my vision. It's not my vision. That's what I would do.
Genie in a
But-
bottle.
That's your
Genie in a
wish.
bottle.
What would the other token be called?
So the Uniswap token, the governance token would be called Uniswap, and then the equity token would be called a meme coin. It would be called APY coin.
Love it.
Puny swap. Derrick. All right. Where can people follow you? I love your takes, man. This was fun.
On Twitter, Zebradoom, ZEEBRADOOM. Yep, follow me on Twitter. I need my yaps.
Beautiful. Derrick, thank you for the insights. This was awesome. For our listeners, don't forget to catch us on Spotify and YouTube. Drop in new episodes every week. Follow us on Twitter @GrowUniswap to stay up to date. That concludes another episode of the Ungovernable Podcast. We are Joe and Austin from Alpha Growth. Thanks again, Derrick. See everybody next week.
Thanks so much.
This was the Ungovernable Podcast by Alpha Growth. Watch all our episodes on YouTube or Spotify or weekly live on X.